I'm working on Bone Road. The Bone Road is my next book in the SERA Archives action thriller series. My name is Aaron R. Linsdau. Check out my website, aaronrlinsdau.com. I write thrillers and have a lot of fun doing it. If you'll check out my profile picture on Amazon, I'm literally wearing chainmail holding a sword. Love this. I don't think it's actually legal to have this much fun. But what I'm doing today is actually doing a live writing session. As you can see, I've got my headset on and I do a lot of dictating for my writing because, just to give you an example of the power of it, I cranked out 7,000 words yesterday. That's a bit high for me, but what I have is my iPad here. Let's see, where is it? Let me show you Scrivener. Okay. See, I don't want to break my cables. But yeah, I use Scrivener there. You can see my writing. And I crank it through, and dictation's pretty messy. That's the one thing about it. But I can get a heck of a lot of words done, and then in the afternoon I just do an editing session and crank it down to actually something readable. To do 7,000 words hand typing, yeah, it's not happening. So I'm in the second half of the second act of my book, working on chapter 14 right here. And let me send a link out to my peeps so you can actually watch me do this. It's pretty entertaining here, really. Prepare to share. Copy. All right, we're going to share this. I'm going to share that. Share this. And there. Okay. We'll see if anybody stops by. It's always fun. Oh, I'll even post this to Facebook. Why not? Yeah. So that's one thing about live streaming. You gotta do a bunch of things to get everything set up. It's kind of an operation. So let's see. So live streaming now. Working on the Bone Road, my next upcoming book. And live stream, yay! Post. Cool, okay, so it's on Facebook. Never know if anybody actually stops by, and that's okay. Because if you don't catch this live, it's recorded, so I convert it to regular video on Amazon. I'm looking at the screen just to make sure I don't miss anything here. All right, now I actually need to get down to work. I've been doing a lot of stuff. I got my author profile up now. I write under a pen name, Aaron R. Linsdau, instead of Aaron Linsdau, because I also have a bunch of nonfiction books like Antarctic Tears, The Most Crucial Knots to Know, and it's some technical reasons why I do that, but in the author world it makes a lot of sense. So what I'm going to do is now work on my Pomodoro, old school, yes, 25-minute, I don't want to waste my time there, but this is a 25-minute sand timer. I don't use any of the tech or timers on my phone or all that. I prefer old mechanical, just like my cuckoo clock from Freiburg in the Black Forest of Bavaria, or Black Forest in Germany. Love it. Super cool little clock, tick, tick. And you can see my poster here. I got my posters done. Yes, they look spectacular. I don't know how good it looks in the webcam, but looks okay. So hopefully this will all work, and we'll get started. So, and I look like I'm in a call center, air traffic control, but I rigged this up. I've got a Sennheiser lavalier microphone right there. I hooked a headset because the headset microphone was terrible. The Sennheiser's the best. I've tried cheap microphones before, and they're just awful. So you get the Sennheiser, you get the best, and yeah, sweet. So let's get on with this. Grant and Luis have just been abandoned by the Chinese colonel that they've had some friction with, and now they've got to deal with it. So what I'm going to do is get my dictation going. All right, this is chapter 14, Pomodoro 1. Okay, there's a lot of setup here. That way I can record the actual transcription, because I use some software for that. And that way, if something goes wrong and I wonder what in the heck I'm saying, I actually capture it. Bone Road, Chapter 1. Okay, cool. Good. Where is it? Boom. Okay. There we go. Oh, and by the way, yes, before I get into this, in a couple of scenes in the Bone Road, I have satellite phones. These are Iridium 9575s. These are satellite phones that work anywhere on the planet. So whenever you hear sat phone in TV or fiction or movies or whatever, these are literally it. I own these. These are my phones. I use them on my expeditions. So when I write about my fiction, I know what I'm talking about. I've used these for months and months at a time. So yeah, and they're like $3 a minute. They're crazy expensive. But the satellite phones are really the money. I'll power it up for you just so you can see it there. And the satellite phone, it's funny, the antenna goes out, but when you put it on your head, you actually have to tilt the little antenna so it points up into space. It's pretty hilarious. Let's see, searching for Iridium network. There we go. All right. So anyway, that is my sat phone. So when I write things, I am by training an engineer. I'm a computational scientist. I'm a polar explorer. So I actually write from experience. This is the real deal. Okay, let's get this going here. Enough talking about talking. Let's actually do the talking about the writing. Okay, so Into the Teeth of the Storm. And I always outline my books. Always, always, always outline my books. That's a big deal. That way it makes it much easier. I have a architecture, so I bring you the emotional experience in a different skin, but the undercurrent is always the same. And that's the whole idea. Let's see, wall, Luis, goggles, okay. All right, let's start recording here. Okay, so I'm just gonna dictate, so I'm not gonna stare at you, I gotta stare at my notes. Grant and Luis sat there as the phone continued to ring, and then a voice came across the line, slightly staticky. "What the heck are you guys up to?" And Grant replied, "Oh, good to talk to you too, Justin." Imelda's voice came over the line. "We thought you guys had run into any big troubles. We didn't hear from you for a while. We were watching the satellite feed, and we weren't exactly sure what was going on because that storm that's coming in is starting to make it very difficult to see what you're up to." And Luis responded, "Well, we ran into some trouble on the way to the market, shall we say." Grant laughed out loud. "Yeah, as in I fell into a pit and got buried by sand. Thank goodness the sand pit actually collapsed and I was able to be freed. Otherwise, poop, I would have been out. So that would have been a real bummer." Justin said, "I'll leave it to you guys to make it entertaining. So what do you have going?" And Luis said, "We're trying to get data on the storm that's coming in, and we found an ancient sarcophagus that was full of this pyrite and silver-colored powder. It had armor in there, and it was actually the Persians who had been to the Taklamakan Desert. That was a big deal because we found chrome-plated swords, just like in the terracotta warrior pit in Xi'an, China." And the line went silent for a moment, and Justin responded, "As in the terracotta warriors?" And Grant replied, "No, not exactly. These guys were real soldiers, and we heard about it, so we're investigating out here. But there is an entire detachment of a Persian army that in 1200 AD ended up in the Taklamakan Desert." And Luis said, "I'm not exactly sure about the absolute timeline because this is the desert of death, but really, how does that play in with the chrome swords?" And Grant replied, "Well, chrome plating was lost by the Chinese. They actually figured it out, and then the Germans and Americans didn't figure it out until World War II and just after World War II. And Imelda piped in, "You guys sure come up with some crazy stuff. How in the world did they have chrome plating?" And Grant replied, "There's a theory that the soil just does it, but it's way too uniform and perfect. That thing looks like a beautiful sword. So whatever is going on in here is definitely worth investigating." Luis injected, "Well, there was a minor problem with the Chinese colonel." And you could hear Justin sigh over the phone. Justin's the commander of the Strategic Exploration and Recovery Agency. And he said, let me guess, things didn't go as well as you'd hoped? And Grant replied, not exactly. Luis interjected, oh, you could say that. We've just been abandoned. The Chinese are pretty much packing up the camp that they used to supply us, and they're getting out of here. Let's see. The storm started whipping and throwing some sand against the doors of the dune buggy and rocking it slightly. And Imelda said, what's going on there? Is it really that bad? And Grant said, yeah, it's pretty bad, but what kind of satellite feed do you get? They heard some ticking on the keyboard over the line, and oh, hey, Nancy's here. Hi, Nancy. Thank you so much for stopping by. Let's say thank you so much for stopping by. Cool. Okay. Nancy's one of my benefactors. She's my aunt, and she supported all my expeditions and all my writing of Antarctic Tears and my book, The Jackson Hole Hiking Guide. So anyway, back to my dictation. It's recording. This is kind of funny. There's some ticking on over the phone, and the guys in the dune buggy heard this little whistle. You guys are in for a walloper. That is a wall that's coming for you. It doesn't look very good. And Grant replied, it's going to get worse. And Justin said over the line, you better believe it. You're in some trouble. Is there a camp or something you can hide out in while the storm blows through? It might be a couple days. Louis said, well, we can escape to the camp, but there's a lot of stuff in that necropolis we don't want to lose. Including there's a shard broken off from the sarcophagus when the Chinese commanders took it out. And Justin said, well, what did they say about it? And Grant said very flatly, they said the rest is trash, we don't care, we got what we came for, and best of luck. Well, that's pretty definitive. Boom. End of chapter. So I try and keep my chapters to about 700 words in the SERA Archives series. Okay, so I need to copy that down, copy it into my software here, and put the dictation into there. And so what I do is my goal, like this chapter I just dictated, you literally saw me dictate this chapter live, is 829 words. Let me hold it up, see if I can show you here. Let's see. Where is the OBS software? There you go. Oh, right there up top says 829 words. So obviously it's pretty messy, but I get the dictation down and then I just bomb it out. Because today I've already dictated, let's see, what have I done? What have I done here? It says 700 words plus 800 words. So 1,500 words. My goal is at least 3,000, so I got to keep cranking on this. This morning I was super, super tired, so that's a bit of a thing there. Chapter 14, so let me add. Chapter 15, and I use Scrivener. Some people love it, some people don't love it with the H word, and it's just how it is. But it's got power that Microsoft Word and Google Docs are like, they're not even in the game. Chapter 15, dictation 826, Pomodoro 1. Okay, good. Chapter 15. Now, chapter 15 is where Grant and Luis have to make a decision of what they're going to do, because the storm's coming. Once it reburies the site, they're not going to be able to access it again. So that's a bit of a challenge. So let me get the status here, done. I will set up my dictation. I'm using an app to record my voice and transcribe the text because I've used just direct transcription into Scrivener or into Notes in the iPhone, and it's terrible. It's not usable. For me, it's funny because I can dictate text messages all day and it works, but this long form material, just falls apart. So it's kind of a thing. Let's see, does anybody stop by? Hey, how's it going? Thank you very much for stopping by. Good. Okay. The choice, and I've got the time in the Pomodoro. So a Pomodoro apparently is an Italian word, And I can't remember if it's an apple or a. Let me look that up real quick. Let's see. What is a? No, temporary. Say duck search. What is a Pomodoro timer and what food was it based on? So a Pomodoro timer, I'm going to stop my timer while I'm blabbing here. I don't want to cheat myself. Is a productivity tool. It's usually 25 minutes. It used to be, Francesco Cirillo developed the method in the 1980s, and it's called Pomodoro, meaning tomato in Italian. Of course, it's Italian. And the whole concept is you work for 25 minutes, you pause for a short break, and then you go do something fun, you come back. My particular fun, I play the piano and violin. I'm just learning. I'm getting better at the piano. Violin's still kind of rough. But that's okay. That's part of the experience. I have channels on my violin and piano. Check out links below in the description, and you can check that out. So I'm going to forge on here. Yeah, the Pomodoro timer has totally changed my life. Old school, like, whatever glass was made, 20 BC technology for time, but it's super cool. I love it. Okay, so I've got a little more time in this Pomodoro here. Oh yeah, the poster behind me looks so good. Thank you very much, Nancy. Yeah, the Bone Road posters came out great. I've got all my other posters. I'll be posting them and using them as backgrounds as I work on my other projects here. So it's really fun to have this marketing material to give you a sense of the place. It's on foam core, actually. I can't stand up. Yeah, let me see if I can stand up. Nah, it's on foam core. So it's easily removable and replaceable. So that's pretty good. So let me forge on with chapter 15, where Grant and Luis have to make the choice. Let's see, the midpoint turn, the darkest, the darkest moment. Okay, here we go. Chapter 15, the choice. And I'm just reading off my outline right here. Oh, hi Kelly. Hi Kiki Gallery. Thank you very much for stopping by. Hi, the Kiki Gallery. Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, Kelly, my girlfriend, does knit designs, and she runs the Kiki Gallery at thekikigallery.com. If you happen to be a knitter and you love doing knit patterns, she makes incredible stuff. A lot of her focus are on hats, so they're pretty quick knits, but fun designs. Check out a link. She'll leave a comment in the video. Go to thekikigallery.com. It's pretty cool. So, of course, I just recorded that in my dictation. Oh, that's funny. Oops. Oh, well. I'll just delete that part. Okay. Grant and Luis sat in the dune buggy as it rocked back and forth. The smell of dust kept filtering through the air filters. No matter how good the HEPA filters were, it was just a dry, desiccated smell of the Taklamakan Desert that made the experience pretty rough. Plus, the wind started rocking the dune buggy back and forth. And it started really making him concerned, like this is going to get really bad. And Justin said, we're starting to work on an evacuation plan for you guys. You really don't want to be there 3 or 4 days because you've got water and everything, but it's going to be suffocating. This is not a place you want to be. Luis replied, well, I guess that's why they call it the Desert of Death, isn't it? Yeah, this desert in Western China is definitely not a place you want to hang out for long term. There have been several cities that have literally disappeared over time, Justin suggested, or Justin said. Grant said, well, we've got a decision to make then. If you can figure out how to get us exfilled out of here, we would love to pick up as much stuff as we can out of this necropolis where all the dead bodies are, plus those chunks of the sarcophagus that got lost, because once they're gone, they're gone. That is a thing. Justin immediately replied, do what you guys can. I don't want you obviously getting killed, but if you can recover something under the SERA protocol of preserve the past and protect the future, what do you really think is there? And just swords or bones, or what is it? Well, we don't want to necessarily disturb the bodies, but we will take a sample, and we've already got clearance and permission to do whatever we want to do now. But what was in that sarcophagus did not look good. When we were looking at the the gas chromatograph and the X-ray lithography of the material, there were biologic spikes on the screen in the Chinese sand crawler. They looked really scary. Everybody put their masks on. Hopefully we don't have something, but as soon as we get out of here, we're going to need to have a full bank of tests done. Imelda interjected, "Are you guys kidding me? Is there some ancient biologic thing there?" And Luis replied, "Well, let's just say those people didn't look like they died in their sleep. They're distorted into grotesque shapes. Some were curled into the fetal position. I think even one guy looked like he had rammed his sword through his gut or had a buddy kill him. It was pretty horrific." "Well, that's always inspiring to know," Justin replied. "Well, do what you can. We're going to work on an evac aircraft. There is a contractor we work with. He's got a Chinese X7 or a J7. I'll have to find that detail. And it's going to be kind of a quick in and out because that storm wall comes once the sand gets too dense, he can't come in there." Grant replied, "Roger, anything else? You're getting really hard to hear." Justin said, "No, expect him in 2 hours and be ready to rock because he won't hang out for long." Boom. Yes! Another chapter in the can. Love this. This is so much easier than typing. Oh my gosh. Let's see, so chapter 15, another 686 words. Ooh, yeah. All right. So we're going to have, let's see, so that's chapter 3. Yes. The midpoint turn, the darkest night. Bum, bum, bum. This is the funnest part. See, that's one thing about writing is just like movies and TV shows, they're actually all the same structure. And I mean, like, especially movies, or not movies, but TV shows, to the minute. Whether you watch Bones, about a pathologist, I think she's in DC, or you watch Emergency 51 from the 1970s, or anything like that, it's all the same. You have the surprise, you have the action, the entry into the 50% midpoint turn. Oh, the Pomodoro is over. I lost a bit of the sand there. I'll keep going for you guys because it's only been 23 minutes. I'll just keep pushing before I take my music break here. I'll do one more chapter to end the second act of my book. But at the 75% mark, you have the darkest moment. So if you watch Hallmark romance shows on Netflix or on the Hallmark Channel or wherever you get them, even they follow the exact example. You watch it where all of a sudden it looks like the couple has this big misunderstanding and, "Oh, I'm out of here." That's always at the 75% mark. So if the show is an hour long and the meltdown happens at 45 minutes, plus or minus a minute, it has to be very exact. The big turn, the revelation, always happens at half an hour. The entry into the world and the meet cute has to happen before the 15-minute mark. That's just how it is. So any successful story follows this structure. If you think you're going to be creative and buck the system like, "Oh, I'm never going to do this," best of luck. If you're Stephen King and you've got hundreds of millions of sales, you can try something speculative. When you're small time and you don't have dozens of books, that doesn't work. So let's get this midpoint turn going here. Love it. Oh, man. Okay, let's see where we... So chapter 15, so I need to do chapter 16. 1, okay. So yeah, there's a little clicky here. Let's say chapter 16, dictation 826, Pomodoro 1. Okay, good. So I've added the chapter to Scrivener, and now I'm going to set that up in my dictation software so it records my voice. I've got a name. Okay, here we go. This is the darkest night. They claw upwards, sunlight. If only they got the shard, but there's no way out. Oh boy. Okay. Okay, here we go. Inside the sand dune buggy, both Grant and Louise started getting themselves going. They put on their goggles, they wrapped around their heads, their turbans and their masks, because at this point the sand was really starting to kick up off the surface and it made breathing a little bit difficult. It wasn't kicking so high in the air as to prevent aircraft flight, but that soon would change. They yelled through their masks and the rocking of the vehicle and said, okay, let's get in there. Do you have your backpack? And let's grab our gear and grab a little cart so we can get out as much as we can. Because once it goes sideways, this is it. Luis didn't even pay attention to him as he was emptying his pack and making as much space as possible. They both looked at each other, silent, friends of 3 decades. Don't really need to talk so much. They know what's already said between them. They know the risk. And they said they decided it's worthwhile, because once it disappears, it disappears. They both opened the door. Grant's he had to crush open with all of his might because the wind was blowing it. But on Luis's side, the wind caught it and whipped it open and almost busted the window, but fortunately it didn't quite break it. They tumbled out and then detached a little carrier with them and then ran for the tomb entrance. The skull that was still there, they thought, you know what, we better take this thing too. And they always debated about leaving skulls in place, but it was out in the sand dune, it was going to get destroyed anyway. So Grant reached down and then ran over to the buggy, tossed it in the seat, and then closed the door. And while that lone skull sat there staring up in space like a detached sentinel, Grant and Louis ran into the tomb. They knew that the Chinese had already placed bracing on it, so it was ready to go and they weren't going to die. And it collapsed, but they still didn't want to hang out too long. The force of that wind would actually cause the dunes to begin shifting around, and just like that huge sinkhole that Grant fell into, they didn't want to find if there were any other surprises. They both, once they get into the safety of the tomb entrance, you can see the tomb entrance right there. Yeah, and the skull. Love the skull. Now they continued to battle through their way in the sand, and then they got into the entrance. And all at once the wind pressure cut off, and all they saw was the sheeting sand blowing by, that amber dust that had no life in it and that would destroy things, and yet that was part of the world. They didn't even mind it. They pulled up their goggles and then unmasked themselves as they mounted their headlamps and began running down the tunnel as fast as they could. Without stumbling over anything and falling down and breaking a wrist or worse. They made their way down, and in 5 minutes they were where the sarcophagus was. Grant walked over to the corner where he saw the chunk had broken off. He picked it up, but he decided, or before he picked it up, he put on his nitro gloves because he said, Luis, I think we better be careful with this stuff. And he put it into a sample bag and then sealed it up and then tossed it in his backpack. And Louis said, well, how in the world are we going to carry swords and all these things out? I think we should do a little video capture and capture as much as we can and just get a couple samples out of here. Grant agreed that they didn't have much time. And so the 2 men began working their way through the cavern, and they turned on their chest camera, kind of like a little GoPro or a body cam like police use. And that way they could record everything, because they knew once they left, they weren't going to be returning. So they picked through as best as they can, or they could, to get the best material out that they wanted. There were dozens and dozens of bodies littering in here, littering the space with the writing on the wall, including the warning of the last person to scratch. I can't remember what it said. I'll have to look it up. He scratched on the wall that this is not a place to be trifled with. And the men, even though they wanted to take some of the items, they took a couple finger bone samples for further DNA analysis to confirm their suspicions. And then they snagged a couple of swords, the ones that looked in the best condition, and one shield to carry it all out on. It was just simply too much material. They didn't have time to make a proper survey. They used a laser gauge on, or no, let's say, their body cameras also had a LiDAR, so it actually made a three-dimensional mapping of the room as they walked around, so by the time they came out, they would actually have a very good reconstruction. People's smartphones, actually the high-end ones, actually have LiDAR, and they have this ability. So as Grant and Luis walked around, they were naturally capturing the cave and had everything ready to go. Grant looked down at his Marathon GSAR watch at the glowing tritium indicators, the little radioactive tubes, and he said, he looked at it, glanced back up, and said, Luis, it's been 15 minutes. We better get out of here. Otherwise, we could spend all day and we might come out to a maelstrom outside. Luis took a couple more pictures and rubbings and walked back over the cart. Okay, let's get ready to haul this thing out of here. Boom! Now that's a thing. I love that. Let me capture that. Alrighty. Dictation, chapter 16. Now, I'm not going to hit the darkest night here yet because I want to have the beat where they're going to go through the tunnel. It's going to be a super short chapter. That's the thing about it. So that is a thing I like to do. Homemade sweet tea. Gotta love it. All right. So I'm going to chapter 16. And what I do is I've already got my chapter outlined, but I just noticed as I was going along in the flow that I wanted them to say, hey, we need to get out of here, to end on the beat, to set up for the darkest night, for when they go out, they're going to have a problem where the sand is going to be so sheeting, they're going to be in real trouble. All right, so they got the shard, so I'm going to call this chapter 16B, dictation 816, Pomo 1. Boom. Okay, and that was, how many words was that? It's another 1,000 words. Yes! I love this. This is so much fun. It's like literally telling you a story and then doing a little bit of cleanup to add the actual cinematic detail, because that's why I write about cinematic detail, and I edit in some of the 5 senses: taste, touch, sight, feeling, and then smell. Because in my openings, a lot of times I love to add those sensory perceptions so you actually experience that as you're reading it. I do a lot of psychological manipulation of my reader, and then you join me for the ride so it's in your head, and I write to be as cinematic as possible so you can actually see what it's like in your mind, because the whole goal is to be on the big screen, right? Okay. Upwards, breaking the sunlight, to mouth. Okay, here we go. And here's the darkest night. So let me grab the name. Get this into my dictation app here. Okay, here we go. Darkest night coming up. Very short chapter. (16B) record. The two men did their best to hurry through the narrow passageway that had just allowed the Chinese crew to remove the sarcophagus. And as they walked through this winding space, they both got the heebie-jeebies, the sense that something wasn't quite right. Occasionally a little bit of dust would fall from the ceiling, a tiny chip would fall. They had already had this experience once when the ceiling collapsed, and that's where Grant fell in the sinkhole that nearly killed him. And both men stopped and looked at each other. They knew that the place was potentially coming apart. After being there for over 800 years, perhaps the exposure to the air was doing it. They weren't exactly sure. They didn't touch anything to cause a collapse, but just little chips would occasionally break off the walls. And they didn't even bother saying anything. They just looked at each other and nodded and kept going. The passageway wound back and forth, and only having 2 men to haul a shield and several swords, a few bone samples, and a couple of other items plus the critical piece of the sarcophagus that the Chinese colonel said that had no value. That was the whole reason why they did all this. And so they continued wandering around, and let's see who, Luis stumbled on the stair, and he said, Grant, stop, hang on. And he looked down, and there was a leg bone just sticking out of the wall. And Grant gently set down the little cart that they were using to pull things out, and he looked down, what in the world is that? And Luis stepped back and gently brushed the sand off the thigh bone, and he said, sure enough, these people are buried in the stone. What in the world happened here? This isn't normal. And Grant said, yeah, that sense of dread, that is something that this place is super creepy. Guess we should get out of here. We don't want to become part of the sandstone, do we? Luis simply shook his head, reached down, and lifted up the hoist. They continued on working their way until they got to the flat part where the Chinese military had cleared the space. And instead of sunlight poking through the light, it was almost dark. And they both stood agape there. And as they walked out, they couldn't walk out because the wind was now blasting. It would raise sand 3 and 4 feet up in the air, and it's just absolutely ablate things, and then the wind would calm down, and then they could see their sand buggy, and then it would come up again. And Grant said, we're in trouble, buddy. Yes. All right. Chapter 16b. Oh, yeah. So, of course, it's not Chapter 16b in the book, but for structure portions or structure ideas, that is how I do this. So if I end up with a chapter I realize that needs to be chopped up or broken up, I just put a B, C, D, or whatever it is, and then I fix it later in editing and layout. So all these details that you see me working on in the backside, it all gets smoothed out. It's actually a pretty slick method. And I spent all of yesterday, well, not all of yesterday, about half of yesterday, a full 7 hours, working on the structure of my series for the SERA Archives and the Grant Coulson series, because I want to make sure to deliver the same emotional beats to you so you have the same thrilling experience, but it doesn't get repetitive. So whether I'm in the desert, the jungle, the Arctic, see, what have I covered so far? Black Ice was the Arctic. The last Echo was in the South Pacific in a stormy jungle. The Shepherd's Code was in Spain in an underground tomb. And now our main character and our foil, Luis, are in a desert. So where should I go next? I was actually thinking about going to Rottenburg, Germany, because my aunt had asked me about my chain mail. And I thought, I need to write a story about that, to give an origin story of my chain mail. That would be pretty fun. But in any case, let me add up the words that I've done in this Pomodoro, just to give you an idea of the power of what I'm doing. So that was 708 words plus 829 words plus 686 words plus 1035 words plus 463, and the grand total is, 3,721 words in the first Pomodoro, baby. Now, I'm going to take a break here and go play my violin and go play my piano. And what I'm using is, I found a book called, instead of The Art of War by Sun Tzu, it is called The War of Art. The War of Art. And I have struggled with this forever. And I mean, like, let's get a fight going here. And what it is it's a thing, let's see, the author's name is Stephen Pressfield. And he talks about the war of art, breaking through the blocks and win your inner creative battles. I had this in Antarctica. My brainstem and my hypothalamus and all this would literally say, Aaron, your hair hurts, you're failing, this itches, that itches, your shirt itches, not your skin, your shirt. My mind would mess with me. It would never stop. In Antarctica and in Greenland, it would just make me bonkers. So I would stop, sit down, and then all of a sudden, your hair can't hurt. You get a haircut, it doesn't hurt. I mean, it was just nuts. And I would stop, and all that would just wash off of me like water off a duck's back. It's cliche, but man, it is so true. And that was it. I realized I am battling my brainstem right here, my core being my subconscious primitive self wanted me to sit and quit. This guy's book, and let me show you this. This was such a revelation. Amazon, one moment, I'll show you. Because if you're creative and you do things like this, you might want to check this out. Like, how come all of a sudden dusting the baseboards is important? How come cleaning under the fridge becomes important? How come, I need to water the lawn, that becomes important when you need to do your work as a creative person? It's crazy. And I thought I was a loser and struggling, like, I'm not alone. So here's the book. Check this out. I'll put a link below. Just remind me to put a link below. The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. And I'm buying this book, going to start reading it tonight. And just knowing that other people who are creative struggle like me, people say, Aaron, you're Superman, you do crazy things, you're a motivational speaker. I am still human. I have the same struggles, the same doubts. I don't really suffer from imposter syndrome that much anymore. On fiction, I'm still kind of grinding with it. But now that I've got a good, solid business plan and structure, it's much easier to deliver the best possible product I can to you. Plus, I was going to say it near the end of the month, but through the beginning of October, I'm starting to work on audiobooks too. So I'll hopefully have audiobooks for you soon. That's going to be fun. I think I'm done for the moment, and I want to do it. And the whole psychology of this is that I finish my Pomodoro, my sand timer is now out, and now I go treat myself to playing a little violin, practicing it, playing a little bit of piano, and it's heading towards lunch. I'm going to eat lunch. But the whole idea is that if I do my work, I get my treat. Literally like a dog, maybe a cat. Like, do your work, and then you get your treat. So I'm going to train myself psychologically that if I do my work, I get my treat vis-a-vis being able to play music and learn to play music better, because I also have some songs in my head I'm already working on. Yeah, I've got a long way to go, but I've got that going too, so stay tuned. But the whole idea is that I train myself that if I do my work, I get my treat, and that motivates me to reprogram my reticular activating system, the psychological filter we all have, to say work equals treat. So all of a sudden I'll wake up like, I don't want to be a workaholic, like, I just work all the time. I do lots of stuff, trust me. Like, I was in Europe for 3 weeks last month. I'm blessed to be able to do that. I had a great time with Kelly. Super, super cool. But in doing that, I've got to do the work to make that up, to pay for the trips and all these other things, to bring better products to you. So I think I'm going to close out this stream. Thank you very much for watching. Please check out my website, aaronrlinsdau.com. If you haven't subscribed yet to my channel, I'm streaming. I've got 4 different things on my author channel to show you what it's like, tell you the stories, share the experiences, and give a little bit of instruction. And thank you very much. Stop by again.